Hi guys, Ron here and welcome to the workshop. After posting my latest race setup, there have been a lot of questions and requests about 1x, and I think from the responses that there are many misconceptions about it, so I decided to go through every component that is or isn't affected in a road single ring setup. So let's start at the front of the bike with the shifters. Now with E-tap you don't really have to do anything to these or anything else. You just take your front derailleur, remove it, and that's that. The shifting works the same way. One thing that stops working, or at least for me it does, I have set up a gear indicator bar on my Garmin, and yeah, that no longer works when you have the front derailleur removed. But if you scroll through your ride data, it still counts your rear shift, so it's still sending the data there. I think it's just the Garmin that can't display it. With the i2, I think it's configurable and you need the additional little bit, so removing the front derailleur doesn't really affect that in any way. Plus, if you do that on a Di2 system, you can fit an XT or XTR Di2 rear mech to get, well, basically a clutch for extra chain security, and it allows you a larger gear range at the back. With mechanical systems, SRAM already sell single ring specific shifters, so this lever set doesn't have a front shifting mechanism at all. Also on my TT bike I bought the R2C shifter, which is brilliant by the way, I really love that, and you can buy that as well as rear only. On other mechanical levers, I think on most of them the shifting mechanism is removable, so if you want the cleanest of setups you can do that. Then going further down the bike, the chainring, arguably the most important part of the whole single ring setup. So what's different here? Because, well, in theory you can use a standard double ring, but it does have some disadvantages. So if you look at standard big ring, the first thing you notice is the chain line. Now, if you want to have a good chain line on your 1x system in all of the gears, then your ring and the teeth on it should be centered on the cassette, so exactly where the middle cock would sit. Whereas if you look at the outer ring, you can see that it's offset to the outside or outboard from the bike, and that makes the chain line quite bad when you are cross-chaining in the large sprockets. And that's not very efficient, can be quite loud, so yeah, that's not optimal, and you would be losing some of the benefits friction wise of a 1x system. Then you can also notice that the outer ring or the teeth on it are heavily sculpted and quite shallow. That's because they're designed to be able to drop the chain to the inner ring. So yeah, that's not ideal for chain retention. Then if you were to use just an inner ring, again that's not ideal because it sits very far inward, and then you will get a very bad chain line on the smaller sprockets. So if you look at a 1x specific ring, you can see that it goes where a big ring would, but the teeth are offset inboard, so they are in line with the middle of the cassette. Then for the teeth or tooth profile itself, you can see that they are vastly different. So a 1x ring uses full-sized teeth, a lot taller than you would find on a regular ring, plus these SRAM ones also use the so-called narrow wide profile. If you look at it, they mesh exactly with the chain. So if you look at it here, the wide link goes into the onto the wide tooth and the narrow one. Again, that is to get more chain tension. As you can see, it's very hard to lift the chain from the chainring itself, and it also helps with noise when you are at the extreme end of the cassette, so the chain runs much smoother. There are other designs as well. For example, like this air coach ring. This uses teeth that are even taller, but they're all narrow. So yeah, that's another option. Shimano also uses a similar design. As for the crankset, I've been asked if I put 1x specific crankset on it. There's no such thing as a 1x specific crankset. You have your standard road cranksets. This is the 130 BCD Quark. That one's a 110. As you can see, both of them have SRAM rings. So if you have a standard road cassette with a standard chainring mount configurations, then you probably will have a lot of options regarding chainrings that are 1x specific, because many brands do them nowadays. So again, for standard 110, 130, no problem. For the Shimano asymmetric ones, no problem. Maybe for some niche cranksets that use some weird asymmetric configurations, you will have trouble finding a 1x specific ring. Okay, so then further on to the chain catcher. Do you need one? Well, that depends on the application and on the type of rear mac you have. So as you can see, on the road bike and the time trial bike, I'm using standard road rear macs. On the cross bike, I use a 1x specific clutch mac. So what is a clutch mac? It has friction clutch in the lower part of the cage, so it's very hard to move forward, because if you hit a bump, this is basically what would happen, and that can derail your chain. On smooth roads or even not very smooth roads, this is not such a problem. You don't encounter so big hits. So I think for this application, I've been using it on my TT bike without the chain catcher for the last year, no problems whatsoever. The only reason I do have one on the road bike is for insurance, because I don't want to be losing a race because of it. If you have a clutch mac, you don't even need one off-road. For gravel riding, etc., mixed terrain riding, cobbles, anything, this is taut enough to keep your chain on. Basically, the only situation where you do really need the maximum security of a chain catcher and a clutch mac is in muddy cyclocross races, where mud can pack on to the chainring itself, and that can cause to push the chainring or the chain off the ring, and that's where you need the extra security. Otherwise, not really necessary. Then, talking about the chain, is the standard chain you'd find in any other road, 11 speed, 10 speed, 9 speed, whatever setup you have, no changes there. But since you don't have a little ring, you can use a chain that's a bit longer, so you don't have so much cage extension when in the bigger sprockets, and that again helps with chain retention and also drivetrain friction. I've also noticed that compared to a regular short cage, using this oversized one greatly reduces the chain slap, which can be an issue when you're running a no clutch mag. So yeah, that's a nice addition, but not necessary at all. As for the cassettes, you can use basically any cassette you want, as long as your rear mag will fit that, and of course your chain length. And choosing that will really depend only on the gearing and the application you're going to use. So you can use very traditional ones, like these 1132s that I have here, 1128, and then something even as extreme as a 936, which goes on to SRAM's XD driver body to get a really nice and large range. Okay, so I think that's all the components of the one bike drivetrain covered. Currently none of my bikes have front max, so it's kind of an interesting proposition. In the next video I'm going to talk about how to actually choose your gearing to suit your terrain. Some people think that one by is very limited. Well, actually it's usable in more scenarios than you would first think, and it surprised me as well. But if you use some calculations, look at some right data, and you can make a very good educated decision regarding gearing. Okay, so I think this is all for today regarding one by systems. If you want to see more about how to choose your gearing or about these bikes themselves, then don't forget to tune into the channel and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.